We're going to talk about all things classroom morning meeting. Morning meeting is a favorite time of the day for me. When I was in the classroom, this time was really sweet because it almost felt like camp counselor days when I would be with my bunk of girls and we'd have our little devotionals in the morning. Just a time to really speak into kids and help them develop really important social emotional learning skills. But also it was a time for the class as a whole just to connect together. We had a lot of really great discussions. We got to read some really great books that have just very valuable life lessons in them. And on top of all of that, I just loved that morning meeting was the first thing we did in the day, like the first real activity, so to speak, after our morning work. And I loved that because it was like easing into the day. It was a soft start, but they were very quick because, as you know, being in the classroom, there is so much to do that we just can't spend a whole hour just talking about life and life skills all day, although there might be occasional times that would be appropriate. Most of the time, that would not be a valuable time of our learning or getting our academic skills in. So we have limited time for morning meetings, so they were always really quick. So I'm just going to show you and explain exactly how they ran in my classroom. So let's start by talking about the morning routine time that happens before we jump into actual morning meeting. In my classroom, we like to do a pretty soft start to the day, meaning that there was not actual objectives or work that had to be completed during this morning time when the students are coming in little by little. So I know every school is different, but at the schools I've worked at, there was usually around a 15 to 20 minute window when students could be arriving to school. Some students often go eat breakfast and some students eat their breakfast at home, so they skip that. So that's why there's a bit of a window of time. So during that time, I just love to have the lights in the classroom off with my lamps on and just create some little ambiance. I also love to play a soft classroom playlist, which I will link for you in the description below. I have that on Spotify, so you can listen to it there. Pro tip though, make sure you turn off the autoplay feature because if the playlist ends, which it probably wouldn't since it's a whole hour long, but if the playlist should end, then it will start shuffling like music that may not be appropriate for students. So I would turn that feature off if you're using it in your classroom. So the students would be coming in. I would stand at the door and greet students, and they knew to wait for me at the door. So if I was like around the room helping someone else, they would just wait and then I would come back to the door as quickly as I could. In my classroom, we each made a handshake, which I think I've described in a previous video, but if I haven't, essentially during the first weeks of school, each student and I have a time where we come up with a handshake of 3 to 4 movements. It could be high-fiving crisscross, it could be high five and elbow taps, whatever it might be. We come up with it and we work on it until I know them all. It takes a couple weeks and then it just kind of sticks naturally. It's really not as hard as it might appear, I promise. So I greet them with their handshake every morning. So that's how they enter the classroom. I say, good morning, happy to see you, glad you're here. We do our handshake, they enter the room. Then on the screen is a morning work slide, which is really the same slide all year round. I just change up the backgrounds depending on the season. So I'm showing you my fall one, which is these beautiful butterflies, a very calming way to start the day. That would be on the screen. The music's playing, the lights are low, just creating a very cozy start your day atmosphere, which I love. So as the students enter the room, they would be looking at the board, but they pretty much know what to expect because it's the same every single day. The first thing I always had them do was fill out their daily check-in. Now, we did have computers in both of the schools I've taught at. You don't have to have a computer for each student, but it is nice to have more than one computer set out for this, and then the students can take turns logging in to do their check-in, or what we did is we would just leave 2 of their Chromebooks out on my back table, and the students would go to our platform called Clever, which is a platform I could share links with them on. You could also use Canvas or Google Classroom or whatever your school uses to share links with students. They would go to that website, click the link, and then they would just fill out their name. There was a spot for them to pick what zone they were in for the day, so they'd pick how they were feeling based on the colored zones that I had taught them. And then they would tell me why they felt that way. This is so simple, but I learned some really, really valuable things from having students fill out a check-in every day. They sometimes would just fill out that they were feeling blue or feeling sad, and then that gave me the opportunity to call them over to talk with them more if they needed, or sometimes they would explain right there in the check-in if they were students who could type well. They would explain what was going on, and then I could call them over and we'd have a little chat about it as needed. Or sometimes it was just non-essential information that was fun to know, like something they were excited about happening over the weekend that I could chat with them about later, or something going on outside the home that they wanted to tell me. It was just really an opportunity for them to tell me anything. On occasion, I'd throw in extra questions into their check-in. Sometimes I'd give a question like, who in our class would you most like to work with on a future assignment? And then I'd have a drop-down menu of all the students in our class for them to select. Or I might reverse that and say, who in our class are you struggling to get along with? And then they can select. So that was a for my eyes only kind of thing, just giving me a little extra insight into the classroom. That was what we called their must do every day. So must do every single morning after they walk in the room, put their bag down, and then fill out the check-in, which takes 2 to 3 minutes tops. After all the students have done their check-in, I just open the results in a Google Sheet, and it's really easy for me to see what zone everyone's in. In this form, I even saw a student's dog had passed away, and so we were able to have a chat. After the check-in, they would check what the catch-up item was. Typically, there were no other must-dos unless it was something simple, but normal morning, there was one must-do, which was the check-in, and then catch-up work. So as you can see, we're going with the condiment theme. So the must-do is the mustard symbol. The ketchup is the ketchup symbol. And to catch up, we had a folder that was our ketchup folder that they would keep any work they were unfinished with inside that folder. Now, they knew that there were some assignments that we were going to be working on over several days, so those items they don't go ahead and work on unless we've talked about how to do it as a class. But if they need to catch up on something unfinished, say a spelling activity that was supposed to be turned in the day before but they didn't get a chance to finish it, maybe they didn't have enough time in their reading group, or they were called out of the class for some reason. So any work like that that they need to finish that was already supposed to be turned in, they would need to catch up on that during their morning work. So this was a really effective time to get students caught up if they had been gone a few days or if they had been out of the classroom during a whole class activity. But it is limiting because I'm at the door greeting students, so I'm not always able to assist them if there's someone that needs help with something. So you have to pick the right items for this kind of thing in the morning. So I tried to pick catch-up items that they could really do independently without much help from me, things we had already learned about. Never anything where they would be confused and not know how to do it. We would just save that and I could call them back to help them at another time. If they had no catch-up work, which happened quite often for students who were very good at getting their work done or who were just quick to finish assignments, they would often know, okay, I don't have any catch-up work, so they moved on to the May-do, or the mayonnaise bottle. And the May-do was pretty much the same every single time. They could pick a STEM bin to work with, or they could pick a math game to play. I have a whole other video about STEM bins that will be coming soon, if it's not already out when you're watching this. But I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview of what those look like. Essentially, there are lots of little bins, and each bin has an item in it that students can mostly build things with. So encouraging their engineering mindset and creative mindset to build things. We also had Play-Doh as an option in there. They loved that. And I got a bin of Play-Doh tools that they could pick a couple items to roll or cut their Play-Doh with. So that was always an option. Another very popular STEM bin choice was the Magna-Tiles, and the Magna-Tiles were purchased with a Donor's Choose project that I did that was fully funded. I got lots of STEM bin items through that, as well as extra math games. So the students would play with those items. They could play with one another. They would just pick a spot on the floor, or if they had Play-Doh, usually at their desk, to play with their items while the music is going. And then once the bell rings, that's pretty much when we had to get started, because even though there were some days where I maybe gave them 5 more minutes, we would just not get everything done in the morning meeting if we didn't start right away. So some students didn't really get time to play with STEM bins or do their catch-up work if they had ate breakfast and were just coming into the room right before the bell rang because they were at breakfast. So that's another reason why I didn't like doing traditional morning work where they had like a project to complete, because there would just not be enough time in the day for them to come in, do an actual piece of work if they weren't coming in until right when the bell rang. As far as math games they love to play with, there are so many, but Sum Swamp is a very popular one, and Snap It Up was by far our favorite. That math game was probably best suited for 2nd to 5th grade. Really, really fun. A lot of mental problem solving, mental math happening there. It could be addition, subtraction, division, or multiplication, their choice. So in our 2nd grade room, we are just doing addition and subtraction for that game. Okay, so now our morning work time is over. They've done their check-in, their catch-up work, and their STEM bins, and if they just entered the room right when the bell rang, they would just have time to do their daily check-in. So then when the time is up, I would stop the music, which my students were so good at spotting. As soon as they heard the music off, they'd be like, oh, it's time to clean up. But in case they didn't notice the music stopping, I would also put up this slide with a 2-minute countdown for them to clean up their STEM bin or their math game, whatever they had chosen to do. So during this time, this is a silent timer. I have used timers that play music, but I just preferred the quiet over more noise since we had just been listening to music. So during that time, they know to be cleaning up quietly. And the expectation in our room is that when the timer is up, they are seated at their desk and that the STEM bin items are totally put away. So that means they really need to start cleaning up as soon as the timer goes on, or they won't have enough time. And the rule in our room is that if a STEM bin is not getting cleaned up consistently on time, then that STEM bin goes away until we can try again, usually the next couple of days, to see if we can make sure we're cleaning up on time. So that is the expectation for our classroom, and it worked very, very well. Then we would go into our morning routine, which is leading into morning meeting. Everything begins with morning, so it's a lot of different words, but essentially we've got morning work, then the morning routine, morning meeting. So we're doing our class routine, which is to watch the announcements, which comes first. Our school did video announcements, so that is also where they would say the pledges. And after we had watched the announcements, said the pledges, we would come to the front of the room to do our class family promise. This is again something we drafted during the first few weeks of school. I have a whole morning meeting unit that helps us draft the promise after we read lots of character education books. And then we say the promise every single morning for the rest of the year. So this is my class's promise from last year. We would go over it together a lot, and then once they really know it, we make motions, and the class meeting leader leads the class in saying this. So the class meeting leader would come up front and start the promise, and everyone would say it with them. And then we go into whatever class song we've been working on for the moment. So I love using songs to just really build our classroom community. It's something really fun for us. It boosts the energy in the day. And the morning song always just incorporates different things we're talking about, positive affirmations, things we've talked about in morning meeting that really just give us good reminders to start the day. So we would sing whatever song we were working on. We usually keep the same one for 3 to 5 weeks. And then we would do a quick check of the calendar. So we'd write the date for the day. They write it in the air, and the meeting leader writes it in the spot on the board, because we did have a smart board. And after that, we do a quick greeting. So this is the pinky shake. They would take their pinky, stand up and say good morning to different friends, and pinky shake. I have so many different greetings. This is just one of them. So I'll have to show you a quick look at the others I have. I try to switch it up, but I also like to reuse the same ones and once I find out what that class likes so that we don't have to relearn how to do the greeting every day. And this is a very quick time. We're just standing up typically and all doing the greeting, and then when I ring the bell, they come back and sit in their carpet spot. Now we are finally at morning meeting. So you'll notice this slide is highlighted, and that is because whatever unit we're working on, I build that in a separate slideshow, and this slide links to that separate slideshow. So then I'd be up at the board and I would tap on morning meeting, and it would open up our unit. So it would look like this, and then whatever unit we'd be working on, we always do our units within 2 weeks at a time. So they would be working on the same concept for those 10 days or 2 weeks of in-class time. Sometimes we would run into mornings where we didn't have time because there were special events or something going on, so we'd have to extend the morning meeting unit to 3 weeks if we didn't get everything done and we needed that extra time to catch up. I also love to save Fridays sometimes for like a class team building activity or game that we could play, and so depending on how often we did that, they lasted us 2 to 3 weeks of time. So a typical morning meeting day is what I'm going to show you next, just kind of what teaching the social emotional skills would look like. So this particular unit happens to be about problem solving, but I go over lots of different skills throughout the year. We usually start with a unit on emotional regulation, teaching students how to self-regulate so that they can choose the best strategies to help themselves be ready to learn when they're at school, if they're feeling different emotions, just how to manage emotions basically. That's what I love to do early in the year. I also love doing a unit on growth mindset early in the year. And we talk about making friendships and our classroom promise, how our class is a family. So those are usually some of the first units I like to start with. But problem solving is another one that typically comes about in the first 2 months of school because it's just a really important skill to build students' independence. So here is a quick look at what the first day would be like. We talk about what it means to problem solve, how we problem solve depending on different situations. Some situations we can do on our own, and with some situations we should get help. So we talk about that. And then I introduced this concept that I love. One of my teacher friends mentioned it to me, and I have just stuck with it ever since because it just makes so much sense and is really good for teaching younger children. So we talk about the difference between an escalator and an elevator. And the concept here is that some problems are easier to solve on your own and some are harder. So we talk about what would you do if you got stuck on an escalator? What if you were on it and it just stopped working? What would you do? Well, you'd probably just keep walking because even though it stopped, you still have access to get where you need to go if you just keep walking. But if you got stuck on an elevator, you can't just keep walking. You're trapped and you would need to use the phone. Hopefully there'd be a phone in the elevator and you could call for help. So you need assistance with the elevator problem, not with the escalator problem. That is just all we did the first day. So really quick. You can see why it needs to be quick though. We're trying to do our whole morning meeting in about 15 to 20 minutes, and that includes the things I showed you. So that includes saying the promise and singing our song and doing the calendar and the greeting, and then going into the lesson. So by the time we get into the lesson, 10 to 15 minutes maximum is truly all that we have. So we can't be just diddle-daddling here. So that's why that might not seem like a very long lesson, but it's strategically not a very long lesson because a lot of times we just like reading one read aloud book or even half a read aloud book would be plenty for a lesson, and then we could break it up and do the rest of the book in the next lesson. So just quick discussion, little bite-sized lessons, mini lessons is how I think of morning meeting. Okay, so now let's look at a day 2 lesson. So we're reviewing what does it mean to problem solve, reviewing the concept we taught in the previous day, and then we watch this video, which I'm going to link for you. It is so good. It explains the escalator problem so well. I don't want to spoil all the fun, but essentially in the video, there are two people that get stuck on the escalator and they do not solve the problem on their own. They are calling for help, and all the students are like, why aren't they just walking? Just walk, just walk. And so we talk about how often in school we might have an escalator problem, but we are asking for help with it when really we could try to solve it on our own. So that is a really great lesson for building independence. And the rest of the 2-week unit, we talk about a lot of situational examples so that they can understand what problems are theirs to solve and what problems they can come to me or should come to a teacher or an adult to get help with. I hope you enjoyed seeing what a typical morning routine, morning work, and morning meeting time looked like in my classroom. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Please leave them in the comments below. And I will be sure to link all the different resources I showed you in the description. See you in the next video.